Good evening, everybody. I'm pleased to present today's webinar on for the IWD, which the Council for Business with Britain has organized. We have a very diverse and interesting panel, rich with experience, and I'm sure today's discussion is bound to be very interesting and useful. I'll do a quick introduction. And we'll take on the questions. So this will take the format of just a question and answer session. We don't have a keynote or a presentation, but because of the type of panelists we have and their experience and what they can bring to the table, we decided to go with questions so that we can draw from them on their experiences and also their thinking on gender parity and how they've handled it in their personal lives or in their companies. So to do a run through with the introductions, we have Sarinda Unambua, who's joining us from MAS. He's CEO of MAS Krida and also a member of the MAS Apparel Board. And the more interesting facts of him, as most of you might know, Sarinda has walked the length of Sri Lanka twice, ridden a bicycle around the island 4 times for 2 different charities. And one of these charities, one of these fundraisers resulted in 2 hospitals, I think, Sari, both are operational now?
One is operational, the other is being built.
Right, so one in the north, one in the south, 2 cancer hospitals. Yeah, so that's Sarinda. And we have Haja Alafifi, who is chairperson and MD of Unilever Sri Lanka. She's arrived in Sri Lanka about a year ago, Haja, and been with the Council for Business with Britain on the committee for about a year now. Thank you for joining us, Haja. And we have Maria. Thank you. We have Maria Raymond, who's just arrived in Sri Lanka. She's the country director for British Council, and we welcome her to Sri Lanka as well as onto the webinar. Glad to have you here, Maria. Maria has worked in the British Council in Pakistan as an area director for Punjab, leading a large office and a strategically important region. She's got about 5 years of working experience with the British Council in South Asia. So we look forward to your comments and sharing of your experiences. We have Tanya Polanovita Vetumuni, who's no stranger to the local market. She's been the treasurer, she's the current treasurer and been a vice president of the CBB. She's currently the group managing director and local partner of IAS Holdings with 3 subsidiaries and about 150 direct staff, and an award winner of many awards in the industry awards and also Women in Management Awards a few times. We have Linda Jibing. I hope I got the surname right. I struggle all the time to pronounce it. Hebing, right? Yeah. Linda is also a vice president with the CBB and a hospitality veteran. She's been with the Hilton for 20 years in different positions and currently the Hilton Residences general manager. Amina Ziauddin is the vice president, is the other vice president of CBB, and is the development director of Norfolk. And we have Arjuna Nanakkara representing the CBB committee as well as his company London Stock Exchange. He's the head of the Shared Services Center in Sri Lanka for the London Stock Exchange. With that done, I will dive into the questions straight away. Given the theme of this year's International Women's Day, choose to challenge, we have some women who have definitely challenged the norm and achieved something for themselves as well as for their companies. And we have 2 companies that have been fairly progressive, very progressive, internationally and locally. London Stock Exchange being an international company and MAS being a homegrown but a global company today. So may I start with Haja? Haja, there is a lot of talk about why we should have a Women's Day, you know, given It's, the world is made up of only men and women, right? So why would one half have a special day? So in light of that, would you care to share some thoughts on what IWD means to you and what it should mean?
I like this provocative question. And honestly, I think we should have more than a day. If that's my summary to the question, let me now tell you why. While some of us believe that it is normal to be a woman today and grow in your career and grow in your life, it is not the case yet. Let us all be honest that we are still, every one of us, live in a society where men believe from their education onwards that they are stronger, more powerful than women. I'm not saying all the men, but some of them. And for as long as the equality has not happened, from the childbirth to the schooling, to the education, to the way we have sometimes unconscious bias, as long as that has not been reached, I really believe that we have to call it out. And we have to remind each other that we women have been for a long time in history and even currently been assumed to be a given, to be the weak one, to be the one that has to do everything and not speak about it, to be the one now that has to work and be in the kitchen and be cooking and be the educator of the kids. Whilst men still till today are usually working, but they don't help at home, but they don't really carry all the other responsibilities. So I think we owe it to women to recognize that there's still to be done. And the world is made 50-50 men, women. The world was fair, but unfortunately, the way society has treated women is still not 50-50. And I think we can let the International Women's Day be a reminder to all of us. Now, what it means to me, I would not say it's a celebration. Many people would say it's a celebration, it's a fantastic thing. No, for me, it's a call for action. And every year it's about what can we do to raise the needle as to the rights women have and the rights that have been taken out of them. So thanks for this first very provocative question, Roshani.
Sari, can I get a view from you from a man's perspective?
So I think Hajar kind of nailed that, because I actually find it quite sad that there has to be a Women's Day, because that shows the disparity. And that shows that there is a long way that we have to go to bridge this gap and to bring women on equal footing to men. And the other thing that you mentioned, Hajar, that really resonated with me is the whole thing of unconscious bias. That's something that we have been spending a lot of time on at MAS, and it's something that I realized that even when growing up, even when we are bringing up, I'm the father of two adult, I would call them men now, even the way we bring up our children is where that unconscious bias gets put into their head. But thankfully, their mother is an extremely, strong career woman, and they've grown up with that very strong female role model. And I think they have a different view of the world. But we grew up, our generation grew up in those traditional households. So there's a lot that we have to do. So I think it's important that we address these issues. But the thing is, when it's once a year and it's just, for about a week, everybody is Facebook posts and everything is about a Women's Day, and then it's forgotten and goes into the background. That's really sad. And I think it's very important that organizational leaders, all of us, play a role in changing that in the little, areas that we can change it. And that's a lot. There's still a lot of work that has to be done, but I'm happy to say that we are well on that journey and making a lot of good progress.
Thank you, Sari. Arjuna, could you share your thoughts on what London Stock Exchange is doing and has done? I know you do a lot of work in that score, and it's, you all have progressed quite a bit on that front. Could you share some thoughts on that?
Yeah, Roshani. So being a multinational organization, sticking to some of the gender balance, and especially the diversity and inclusion comes in as strategic priorities for an organization. And we start from the top, where organization has representation to strategically place certain work streams and review and have a proper governance framework around across the world, starting from the expo. And we maintain that value chain right up to the end point. So as a result, we do have certain targets like having 40% gender balance at least in 2021, and we have progressive targets there onwards. We also have statistics around a lot of governance pieces that we manage across. We also have certain values that we want to inculcate around diversity and inclusion and gender. We take initiatives on women-led networks inside the organization, so women have certain voice in the organization without having men to decide for them. We also have a certain level of, I would say, vigilance around committees. Then where there are strategic moments like recruitment, we ensure that there is a balance in certain interview panels. We also try to make sure that we create certain inclusive, as a cultural norm, we create certain inclusive mechanisms to ensure that women actually work and they also become very naturally affiliated to a culture, so that we can bring out the best of their corporate life as well as their personal life. And in addition to that, we have gone a bit extreme and given parental care, where women are encouraged to have their kids sent to a nursery called Fresh, and we sort out certain situations by giving them nannies. So being a mother and raising kids is not a challenge when you want to actually come into a very progressive career. We also promote women in senior leadership. That has been the biggest challenge, because when you don't have a lot of participation from ground up, and women sometimes fade off from their progressive careers, it's difficult to have women in senior management participation. So we keep encouraging that.
Thank you, Arjuna.
Yeah.
You know, when we, like Sari said about you know, having a female who's career minded and who's a strong career woman helps any male child growing up in a household. And then, you know, I think that's changing, as he said right now. And to maybe I can ask Maria this question. Maria, we all have figures who inspired us, who inspire us still. Do you have any, you know, who inspired you and who had a big impact on you, and how was that?
So I've been thinking about this question, and often, by the way, I sometimes feel a lot of men will say my wife, my mother, my daughters, and I always find that's a very lazy answer. Who's inspired me in my career? I'd say that, first of all, I've been really lucky in that both when I was studying at Cambridge and then in my early career, I was able to meet an incredible number of really inspiring women who are at the top of their field, and that I think is something we don't see enough of. You know, sometimes I rack my brains, think of who's a great female scientist, who's the first woman to go to the moon, and so on. But the truth is, I find that the real role models of my life have been the women I've worked with and the women that have taught me. So again, back at university, amazing lecturers, amazing women who, for the time that they were doing what they were doing, were real groundbreaking women in academia. And then in my career, just women who actually nurtured me saw something in me that was worth developing, and then guided me through what was essentially a brand new territory and something, and an environment in which I felt very insecure. I felt I didn't deserve to be where I was, and it was only through having women role models and managers and female leaders and female mentors that I was able to almost project myself as a leader as well, and then work towards that. And I would not have been able to do that without those women in my life. And I guess that just ties back to, unless we see these women, and celebrate them and use International Women's Day and other days, things like that, we won't be able to encourage other women to do the same. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Maria. Linda, hospitality is not an industry where you have that many women leaders. And if you know locally, it is an industry where families are worried about, of kind of, you know, the females are not or were not encouraged. And some of our companies have had to do a lot of work in convincing families that it is a career as good as any for any person, you know, be it man, woman, or child. Not child, sorry. So Linda, not child, certainly not child. What am I saying? So Linda, can you tell us, in your career, you know, the challenges you faced personally, what did you face and how did you overcome some of them?
Yeah, you know, interestingly, I was asked, and that, I see you're still.
No, you can go ahead.
Okay. I was asked when I was pregnant with my first child, and this is in Europe. I was asked if I was sure that I was going to come back with the same grit after I had given birth to my child. So I responded that I didn't know, because having a child is a life-changing experience, and I wasn't sure how I would react to that in advance. Nevertheless, my intention was to come back with the same grit, and it wasn't up to this gentleman to have an opinion about that before the fact. So it turned out that my initial thought process was right, and I did come back after 3 months of maternity leave with I think the same grit. In the same period though, I was challenged by my environment and had some social pressure, as in why I would continue working 5 days a week. And that, you know, why would I have a child if I was gonna leave it to somebody else to take care of, and continue working basically full time. So that's when I realized you really can't please everybody. And the only person that you need to please is yourself and your family, right? What works for you, what works for your partner, and what works for your family. So I think it's really important to kind of be focused on your own dreams and goals. Hospitality, indeed, especially in Sri Lanka, has not quite achieved gender equality. I think on average, hotels, female participation is just over 10%, between 10 and 15%, which obviously creates a lot of opportunity. Unfortunately, I can share an experience that just this week, I had a female resign. She recently got married and her husband asked her to stop working to take care of a family in advance. Well, they haven't actually built the family yet, but he feels that that is what she needs to do. And unfortunately, she does that. And it makes her cry because she wants to continue her career. So that I find very difficult situations. And unfortunately, other than encouraging her to educate her children differently, to allow both her sons to have a different opinion and her daughters to be strong enough to follow their own dreams and have those conversations at home. Indeed, what we can do now is look at our own processes and make sure that the opportunities in terms of recruitment, retention, and development are equal for everybody.
Yeah. Tanya, you've reached the top in an industry again that's been, male dominated. Freight forwarding is a tough industry, or considered a tough industry. You've headed several companies, built businesses on your own. You want to comment on how you managed to do that? More as a lesson for the younger women who are looking at us?
Yeah, thanks, Roshani. So interestingly, when I got into the industry, I had no clue the logistic or the freight forwarding is a male-dominant industry, which I'm very thankful for that, because at young age, if you are to look at industries on gender basis, I think most of us women would refrain from joining the industry which is perceived to be a freight male-dominant. To be thankful, for some reason, even though it's perceived to be male dominant, I didn't face a lot of challenges. I think when I now think back, maybe because for me it was a job rather than saying, okay, I have a whole lot of male colleagues around me, or it's a boys club, or I didn't think like that. For me, it was very interesting industry, and I wanted to stay. So I make sure everyone knew that I'm here to stay, right? And they knew that I'm very eager to learn, and I was committed to my job. When you join as a management trainee, you have to go through all the in departments, and you have to learn. When we started, we had to answer the phone too. So it's a ground level training that we got. So we were the bunch of us who joined as management trainees. We were very, very committed bunch. And so first thing, what I would like to say for the younger people, you have to be committed to your job, and you have to make sure that you're open to learn, and also the respect. Doesn't matter whether male colleague or you have a female colleague, that respect is very important. And if you want to be treated equally, you have to also know that it comes with a lot of challenges. That means that you have to move away also being that stereotype, right? And that you create that professional attitudes towards your career. So, and I would say, even though with all that mindset, I have faced many challenges. I mean, when I became a chairperson of Sri Lanka Freight and Logistic Association, it's by invite, and we had 12 executive committee members sitting around the table, a lot of MNCs. It was challenging because I had to speak 10 times louder than my male colleagues around the table. But for me, it was okay. I stayed there knowing. So when you know what to expect, you have to be also have that mindset, and you also have to be, you have to become part of that the whole environment. Of course, we as women, we have certain restrictions. We should know where to draw the line. As long as you have this understanding, and if you are committed, and you are respectful of your male colleagues, and you are good at your job, I think it should not be too tough.
So I have another follow-up question on what you said. Not only as a career, but as an entrepreneur, you've made your mark. What would you like to say about being a woman in entrepreneurship? Because you have a lot of small SMEs in the country, women-led SME organizations. And I feel like women get attracted more towards running their own small business than maybe choosing the corporate side. Maybe sharing your experience in doing that might help. Would you like to share some thoughts?
Roshani, can you come back? You lost, I could not hear you.
Okay, so my point was, you've made your mark as an entrepreneur too, right? In the same industry. On the side of entrepreneurship, because we have most females who sometimes look at doing small businesses rather than joining the corporate world, because that gives them the flexibility they need, and maybe the independence they need. Would you like to comment on the challenges you faced in getting into entrepreneurship? I mean, it's gender neutral, but nevertheless, from your point of view?
Yeah, so in our industry, not many have created entrepreneurial business environment because again, the mindset is like it's a male dominant. It's very challenging. We have about 85% male colleagues working with us in the company. My biggest challenge to date, right? We are being, what is the word? We are being, okay, I'm trying to get the right word. See, if we have other male directors in the organization versus having the female directors in the organization, so they always compare. And to date, we have that situation in our industry. If you have they expect women to probably have that softer side, even in business environment. But if we are being challenged, or if we challenge any of our male colleagues today, we are being compared, and there is a lot of negative thoughts around it. But by saying that, also creating that sort of an entrepreneurial mindset and creating this business environment gives also the others the opportunity to say, if you put your mind, it doesn't matter whether you're male or female, go for it. And there'll always be challenge. I'm sure men around us also face a lot of challenges, but for women, because we have to fight probably 2-3 times harder than our male colleagues to create that environment.
Thank you, Tanya. Amina, we talk about stereotyping, unconscious biases being a barrier. Would you like to talk about anything you have faced? How did you overcome in your career thus far?
So hi, good afternoon all. I have a few instances I'd like to talk about. I'm an engineer, so I think on the get-go where you introduce yourself as a female engineer, people do raise an eyebrow. I do remember walking into a corporate event, and I was seated at a table, and the men at the table, both Sri Lankan and non-Sri Lankan, were talking about cars and engines. And then stopped and looked at me and was like, "Oh, I'm sorry to bore you. I know this won't interest you." So I paused for a second and I thought, should I, shouldn't I? And I thought, you know what, I will. And I said, actually, I've been to that factory where they make all those things, and I did an XYZ project on it, and I can tell you about the functions of this engine. And table went quiet. So that instant thing that women don't know anything about cars, or women don't have anything to know anything about technology, is something that is still inherent in society. And obviously, I'm a Muslim woman, I wear a headscarf. So immediately the perception is that I'll be a quiet, stay behind the curtain sort of girl who will not challenge any sort of directives or questions answered at me, thrown at me. And I was at an event with a male colleague, and they just told them that the director of Norfolk Foods was coming. They didn't say who or what, like who the name was. So immediately all the men spoke to my colleague and were like, "Oh, welcome." And it was quite awkward because he turned and said, "No, actually, I'm not the director. She is." And again, awkward silence. So there's a lot of things where people assume that if you're the woman in the room, you are not the most important person there, whereas most of the time we are. So I think that perception definitely has to change. And those are the few examples that I've had. I mean, I think there are more, but just to give a small detail into that.
And how do you suggest now, it's very interesting how you handled it upfront and head on. How do you suggest everybody does that?
I think I've been conditioned almost to kind of take a step back in situations. And I think that really needs to change. I think women are told, you can have your say, you can be opinionated, but do it quietly. Don't rock the boat too much. But I think that narrative is now changing, where women are told, no, if you have an opinion, state it. If you think differently, state it. And I think in the last few years, you can see that change. So I would say I mean, maybe not so head on, but know yourself and have your voice and use it.
Thank you, Amina. Haja, Unilever is a company that has achieved gender parity. I think it did a couple of years ago. Quite commendable. I'm just wondering if you can share some thoughts on how the organization did it. What was the support, the structure of the organization put behind this effort in order to achieve that?
So I'll try to be brief, Roshani. First of all, at Unilever, we believe in gender neutral, not even men, women, gender neutral. And towards that goal, when you put a whole company on a gender neutral, something that Tanya has said, you start taking the gender out of the equation and you speak about what you bring to the table, as Amina has mentioned. So that's, I think, is something which is really entrenched in the way we do business. Something Arjuna has said we have adopted many years ago, which is for every interview, we make it a must to have 2 female for 1 man. And some have said back at the time that is unfair towards women, towards men. But as we know, it is so tough for women anyways to advance in their education and in careers, that we have made that as a platform for us to start selecting women to go into the jobs. The jobs from factory to chairperson. So that was a whole objective, not to just take this as a KPI, because that's the other thing, is that some companies, they want to tick a box. And to really put merit, because at the end you have a man and a woman at the final interview, right? So then merit comes as who really merits the job, instead of no, it has to be a woman, so that we tick a box. That's one thing. For Unilever has other programs which we have put in place. We have achieved the gender balance back in 2019. And I'll just give you some examples. For example, this year, actually in Sri Lanka, we have launched the domestic abuse policy, because one of the reasons why women do not advance, I think Linda has referred to it, is there is more domestic violence towards a woman worldwide. 1 in 3 women gets an abusive domestic environment versus 1 in 7 men. Yeah, so it of course happens both sides. So I'll give you an example in Sri Lanka. If any woman is victim of that, she gets an accommodation for free, because we know that shelter is very important when you are in an environment like this. She gets holidays, she gets a financial support. And that is something we are doing in Unilever Sri Lanka and everywhere else in the world. So I can send you our policy. Of course, we have creche and everything to support women inside the company, because we also don't want for female to be not without their kids. So we have a creche inside the company for the kids with the right schooling, right programs, and that's happened actually in Grand Pass here in Colombo. One other thing we're doing, which is I think makes the dignity of all women rise. You know how women want to be career makers as well as mothers. Yeah, so when you ask a woman, that's usually what they really want, the 2 of them. So we also have put a program to support fertility, because we know that with today's stressful environment, it's very difficult for women to conceive and carry that baby to term. When she's at work, she's stressed, she has a husband who's still demanding for food. So that's the other thing we're doing, is fertility, private fertility paid by the company. So these are, I'm giving you glimpses of what we're doing towards diversity. Now, the most important thing, I think Arjuna has mentioned it, is when you do diversity, are you really reaching inclusion? Because one thing is diversity, with all the, maybe it's KPIs, maybe it's a genuine thing. And another thing is inclusion. Now, on the inclusion side of things, we have psychologist support. We have coaching and mentoring. I think Maria has spoken about it. We see that inclusion sometimes actually does not happen because women become more competitive towards women as they grow up in the organization. So mentoring from women to raise women, it's a new concept, which we also are trying to develop. Yeah, so these are some types of inclusion styles that we are calling out. Now there is a hotline for any women that has felt that there is either a behavior or a remark that has gone towards her. There is a possibility to log it, and there is a possibility to speak about it. So for me, inclusion is all about providing the psychological safety for women to say, look, I really didn't like that comment, or I think that comment was not useful. Now I need to, praise Linda for the examples she has given on when she was pregnant. That's a really difficult feedback to get. And in Europe, when I arrived to Sri Lanka, 3 weeks into arriving to Sri Lanka, and I'll give you a different twist. I was presenting to a big, large group, I think 500 or 600 of our staff. And I got actually, it was said from a nice way. I was asked, oh, why are we receiving this chairperson young and beautiful? And, it strikes you. That's exactly what Amina had said. They don't see who you are as a person, but they see who you are showing. Do I wear a headscarf? Am I wearing makeup? Am I well dressed? Whereas as a man, you can be in a t-shirt and you will not be judged. So just to say, I think the unconscious bias is really something which is big, and we need to do something about it. So Roshani, I'll leave it there. I hope I've addressed the question.
Thank you. Yes, of course you did. On that question, Sari, you want to come in on unconscious bias? You did talk about it when you said, maybe the next generation is growing up differently. And I see that in my son too, going to a co-ed school, they see no difference between the girls and boys, and, they treat each other equally. They don't even consider differently. They play the same sport, they do everything. So in that light, would you like to talk about, because you've been very progressive as an organization, some comments from you on that?
Yeah, certainly. And Roshani, I don't think, your son having that view, don't take away from the fact that you obviously have parented him very well, because as much as there is exposure given in schools, the parenting has a lot to do with how people turn out. So I think credit to you and Stefan for that. But I'd just like to touch on a couple of things. One that Haja mentioned, and yeah, this is digressing a little from the question you asked me. But not recently, about 2 years ago, we looked at the organization and realized that the middle level management structure was very heavily male biased. And we decided to recruit a whole bunch of management trainees. And when we set out to create the panel, I looked at the panel and it was all stereotypical middle-aged older men, or middle-aged or older men. And we scrapped it. And we said, if you get these guys to interview management trainees to come in to change the organization's character and the culture and everything, you're going to get the same mold that you have already, which is the root cause of the problem. And we got a panel of about 8 women from across MAS, entirely women panel, to recruit our management trainees. And we recruited 13 management trainees. One left us to join Unilever. Thanks, Haja. Thanks for that. And apart from that, we have 12, of which there are 9 women. 9 women came through, and in my 21 years of working at MAS, this is probably the 8th batch of management trainees that I have seen. By far the best, by far the smartest, by far the most progressive, the most intelligent, and the most productive that we have got. And it all happened because we changed the gender balance of the interview panel. And I firmly believe that, having that balance or the tilt in favor of women, I find that the judgment and the kind of quality that we got was a lot better. Men go in with blinkers on. Women tend to have a much broader perspective when they're selecting people. And when we don't have that balance in a on our boards, on our senior leadership teams, I think we lose out a huge amount. So we're working a lot towards getting those balances in, but it's a lot of work in progress, and I think Unilever has definitely set the global standard. In terms of unconscious bias, that is something that is very, very prevalent in the workplace. For example, if you sit at a meeting and somebody has to take minutes, everybody will turn to the woman and be like, will you take the minutes? Or if somebody wants a cup of tea, they'll be like, could you fix me a cup of tea? You know, that kind of just behavioral traits that come, people don't even know that they're doing it. So I think the first thing is making people aware. And what we have done is we've got consultants coming in and work with us through the structure, starting from almost the factory floor level, actually from the factory floor level, all the way through talking to people, training people, doing workshops, running through exercises and, kind of role play exercises, all this stuff, creating the awareness that in our behavior is deeply ingrained these biases that we don't even know are biases. First and foremost, we don't even know they are biases. Most people aren't even conscious, because we, especially our generation, the older generation here, have grown up with that mom at home, homemaker, dad goes to work, and that kind of gender imbalance. And a lot of the careers that I have seen succeeding in among the women that I have been fortunate enough to work with have had one ingredient, and that has been a very strong, very supportive husband. That has been the underlying, without a shadow of a doubt. That has been, because I've worked with some incredibly smart women, and I've had the, I've had the fortune of having some wonderful colleagues and bosses and subordinates that I've worked with. But the one thing that makes people succeed in their career and go beyond a certain point has been a strong support from the home front, and a husband who understands, or parents who support. So I think those are things that we really need to encourage and create the awareness, because I think to make the changes, first we have to create the awareness. And a lot of us are not aware. There is absolute zero awareness among us people.
Thank you, Sari. Arjuna, can I hear some comments on you on that? Because your organization has an ingrained process in this and has had for a while. And those are global processes. Could you maybe come in on this same thing?
Yeah, so I've been in the industry for about 25 years, and strangely, conscious bias was a specific topic in London Stock Exchange, and that's the first time I got to know it as a part of an intro kit. So that was quite commendable. Whereas, on most of the organizations that I worked, it was made a very self-awareness as a topic by itself. And I would agree with Sarinder here. It is a topic which is hidden under the carpet. So very difficult for somebody to even realize that there's unconscious bias happening in and around us. So we do have a lot of training kits around it, and we are talking about it as a regular topic when we take decisions. Sometimes we have this, very free speaking culture. So anybody who has an opinion can speak up. So that becomes a foundation for most of these things. So when somebody takes a decision, and if another person is not very comfortable, it's quite okay to say, are you biased on this decision? And people tend to ask that without any fear. So people have asked that from me as well, and I haven't seen any problem in that. So that's a real foundation to create this topic in a overall corporate culture. And it also doesn't stop there. You need to keep investing in this as regular training, regular topics, regular webinars, where people speak of examples. People take global incidents related to unconscious bias, for example, Black Lives Matter. How does that relate as a global topic to Sri Lanka? And convert that topic into a Sri Lankan context and talk about it. So those matter in an organization. So if you have a structure and a culture where you nurture this, it actually comes up as a topic that everybody understands. But you cannot actually rule out that just because we spoke about this topic, everybody understands and everybody behaves within a certain perimeter. People do cross the line. That's something that you need to know. And when that happens, there are plenty of ways that we can ring fence it back. So one is having a very good speak up process. As a process by itself, if you feel that something is not really right, you can actually speak up to a quite independent panel, which would look at that speak up quite seriously, investigate it without bloating it out of proportion, and come back with real corrective action. Sometimes it is counseling. Some people need to go refresh themselves, come back and re-look at what they believe in life. Because as some panelists said, we have been brought up in such a strong way with our beliefs. We don't see it right in front of us. For example, I'm saying, start from our schooling. Some generations have not been in mixed schooling. So how do we actually appreciate women and what they go through as men? And how do we actually get that into our lives when we suddenly see this in our graduate education to corporate life? It's very difficult. So you need to really flush this out and get people into the correct track. Second is, you need to have a lot of counseling in place, like employee assistance schemes, which we do have, where people can reflect on what happened and come back and have a fresh life around it when they face incidents. Obviously, you need to have a lot of discipline around this when people cross the line. I mean, if you really cross the line in serious at serious level, it could be harassment, which we didn't speak in this webinar. But harassment is a serious issue. So how an organization responds to it, how it actually takes care of the parties affected and maintain their confidentiality, and how they come out of that as an experience in life and in their career without undue damage, I would say, is a great part of that process. But overall, I mean, as organizations, somewhere down the line, they need to invest in this process and make sure that women, and both men and women who are in this together, they appreciate this as a subject and they change their behavior, and culturally we grid this together and move it forward. There is no real measurement to say an organization has done all and seen it all. It has to be progressive. You have to start it somewhere, and you need to mature this topic to a level where you see real results.
Thank you, Arjuna. There's a lot of talk about, and we ourselves talk about, paying it forward and making sure that we help other women, actually help anyone come up in life, whether be it in career or just, in general life. And here, if we can talk about helping women further their careers, perhaps maybe Tanya, could we talk about how we can make an impact on other women, and what should we be doing? What are we doing? What would you like see being done in society today by both men and women?
So, Roshani, before we go into that, we have to also appreciate the women before our era. If you look at, we have had very successful women. You look at Rohini Nanayakkara to Mrs. Manoalas, we have lots of very successful women. And during their time, they didn't have this sort of a platform where they could come in and speak out and talk about the difficulties that they have faced. Today, we are very, very fortunate. We have lot of forums, lot of platforms, lot of organizations are creating very, very lot of opportunity for young girls and women to speak of their challenges and the challenges that they face today. So we, you know, we as industry leaders, I think it's our responsibility that we create a very favorable, very a neutral environment for anyone who works in our organization. They should be able to speak up. They should be able to share their challenges very openly without having to worry the repercussions of them addressing the situations that they're facing. We also have to be open here, because a lot of the time when women face challenges in the opportunity and they need support, right? They cannot rely on another female colleagues because they feel, okay, I would probably have a situation to face together with my colleague who's facing the similar type of situation. So we as women, firstly, we have to be very, very supportive. We have to encourage and we have to be united, not only just in our own organizations, or look at the industries, right? Most of the time, if there's a woman heading, or if we have to report to another women colleague in the organization, we are very worried, we are very fearful, because we feel that, okay, my chance of now getting to the next level will be curtailed, right? We are very reluctant to report to another female colleague, right? That's a reality. We have to come out of that mindset. If we want everyone to treat women equally, then we as women also have to have an open mindset, right? Respectful of other women, appreciate the achievement of another female colleague, right? And acknowledge and be supportive. So I think we as industry leaders, I think it's important that we create that platform for young girls and women who can speak. If they're facing any challenges, we have to start that from ground level. That means from our own organizations will have to create that. Then we have to bring that to the industries. And then we, of course, open a lot of doors for the others to participate and be open about it. So I think while we appreciate what our generations before us has created for us, I think we have to now create that platform for the younger generation to get into the industries that perceived to be male, but they will get into that knowing that they have a platform and they have nothing to be worried of. So if you look at my industry as the former chairperson of Sri Lanka Logistic and Freight Forwarders Association, my wish that we create in our industry that platform so many women will look at joining the industry without having to worry, without seeing it as a male's club, but it's an industry that they can thrive on. So that is my wish for as an industry leader.
Thank you, Tanya. That brings me to a fairly controversial topic, which you alluded to too. There is this notion that women don't help women. And then, some talk about the queen bee syndrome. If one has achieved and then you try not to let someone else come to that position, or, so there's all these theories floating around, and we get asked all the time, that you don't help your own kind. I'd like maybe Haja and Linda, from an international perspective, Haja, would you like to take that on? There is a notion like that about, that we don't help each other. And maybe I can ask Sari to come in for a different perspective once they finish. Haja?
Yes, I'm more than happy to take that. So it exists. Yeah, it is true. and I am sure we all have gone through bosses who are women or peers or and there was a little bit of a tension. And I think, if I could dissect this, Roshani, from different angles. I think there is a natural side of it. We women are a little bit more emotional. By the way, it's a plus, it's not a negative. And because we hold more our emotions on our sleeve, we are more forwardcoming, we're more honest. And therefore, women towards women, we may have a real conversation as to where we were hurt or not, and we may not choose to have the same conversation with the male boss. I'm just, I want to place that because we need to also recognize that there is a difference of styles. Now, towards the second leg of it, which is, if there is an International Women's Day, it is also to recognize that women should shoulder other women, should support other women, and we should really strive to do that. And honestly, I think we are role modeling. So Roshani, you have here one of the best female panelists of Sri Lanka. And if today we take the pledge that we would like to create that environment where we start, it starts by me, by you, where we start to be conscious that I might be driving without noticing, we spoke about it, unconscious bias, an environment where women are not going to progress because I'm displaying this and this and that. I think we can get better at it. So that's the second one. Now, I think there is a third one, which is, why do we want to support more women? Yeah, why can't we just let the whole thing be? If there is a tension, let it be. So I'd like to come with some statistics here. So the latest report from the IMF, and it's for Sri Lanka, has suggested that Sri Lanka's GDP would grow by 20% if there was a 50-50 women and men, number one. Then McKinsey came to it, and McKinsey said by 2025, the GDP could add plus 2.5% if we had more women. So if it is not just out of respect, as Tanya has said, it should also be from a business aspect that we should be helping women, not even just from a, a normal good well-being, being kind. And then they've gone to say why. And it's a very simple why for all the females that are here together with us, why we should support other women. They said that for any decision, the process of that decision is the most important, right? As to how you arrive to a decision making. And for the process to be as unbiased as possible, that process, as Sarinda has said, has to come from different points of views. This is why you need a woman, more women into your decision process. The report concludes that women are better at dealing with conflict. Women are better at stakeholdering, creating networks, and women are better at managing power dynamics. We know very well when a meeting is full of testosterone, there's so much testosterone that things cannot be really discussed, because otherwise there could be gloves as well in the meeting. Whereas with women, there is a balancing act that can happen. So I think my plea here, and I might have done it as well, so one needs to also acknowledge that sometimes we do it without recognizing, is for all the female, if you don't do it out of respect to other women, do it just from a business mindset to let the growth and the economy flourish.
Thank you, Haja. Linda, any comments on that?
Yeah, totally. A lot. That point I wanted to allude to, that Hajar mentioned as well, that hadn't been addressed until she alluded to it, that diversity is confirmed to have a positive impact. So we're not, or I am definitely not saying that there should be more women on a board or in a leadership team, but it's exactly that variety of frames of references that allows for better outcomes of any kind of challenge or innovation, etc., etc. To come back to the Queen Bee, I'm going to take a slightly different approach there. And I would almost think that saying such a thing is maybe even part of the problem, Roshani, and a sexist comment in itself. Because this might be true, but there's more a reflection of bad leadership than of the fact that this person is a woman. There's enough men as well where you feel that a leadership position is a rank to be obtained instead of an opportunity to serve. And there is enough men and women that use power and control to drive performance instead of sharing power and control to drive engagement. So the fact that we call her a queen bee, what do we call him? It's just bad leadership.
Excellent comment. Thank you, Linda. So Sari, I'd like to hear from you from a man's perspective.
Okay, so I'm going to say something that this is just going by gut feel and just a little not out of the general business context. But what I feel is most of the environments that have been created, because I've seen two examples, right? One of the companies that I worked in for a fairly long period of time had almost 50-50 balance between men and women on our senior leadership team. The behavior there among the women was very different to a company that I have worked in that had very small representation of women. Now, in the company that had that big, the larger number, the 50-50 balance kind of, women tended to be a lot more supportive of each other and a lot more supportive in terms of even people below them, bringing them up to a particular level and helping people with their career progression. In the other company, I just felt that there's this psychological thing of there are very few positions for women and I'm there and I need to protect myself. So there is a lot more, there's that feeling of almost competition. And I just felt that there was a feeling of I'm the chosen one. So therefore you guys need to really like kind of fight your way to get there. And I feel that that is more like something that comes in from, deep rooted maybe in our genes, where that competition comes out as soon as you feel that you're competing for a small space, for a limited number of spots. As soon as you open it up and create the opportunity for more people to come up, I feel that creates a more supportive environment. And speaking of supportive environments, I just want to backtrack on something I said about, husbands and families supporting. The reason I said that is, again, going back to when women go, and I believe one of the ladies on the panel said that as well, because regardless of how senior you are in the organization, in most Asian households, when you come home, you have to be the mother, you have to be the dutiful daughter, the dutiful wife, do the cooking, make sure the groceries are done, do the homework and all. It's very difficult to balance that unless you have support from your family. So, or you have to be single, unmarried, no kids, no obligations, and be able to do it. So that's why I meant that. But going back to this, I feel the competition and that feeling of there's very few slots to be taken up brings out that the queen bee kind of, I'm the one, I'm the chosen one, I need to protect my domain kind of attitude.
Thank you, Sari. Maria, from South Asia is culturally rich and also at the same time traditional. Can you give me your view? You've come to this level in a British company, as in the British Council. You've worked your way through coming from South Asia. Some lessons that you from your career. Can you share some lessons for the younger ones and the audience from your career?
So, a lot to unpack there, and I must say I'm speaking as a childless, single, unmarried career woman who has not had the support of a supportive husband to navigate her career. Although I sometimes think the unpaid labor of a wife would be quite useful in sort of helping me network and socialize. I don't think we talk enough about the amount of work women do in marriages and to support sort of the careers of men actually in the social structure. In any case, I think what's been interesting for me working for the British Council, which to speak candidly is an organization primarily for a long time historically been led by men and often by white men in countries around the world. As my first posting for council was in Pakistan, in the Punjab, which is quite a challenging space for women. And as the first area director who was a woman, but also not white, in the council's history in Pakistan, there was an element of breaking some stereotypes and finding it quite challenging to deal with perceptions of what someone in my position should look like versus who I was and what I looked like. There were two things that were quite useful for me. I felt like I was providing sort of a role model. I was role modeling and perhaps in some ways an inspiration for young women in the organization, but for stakeholders and the people that I met externally, it was a real, I found I was trying, it was an uphill battle for me. And obviously when you come to South Asia, there's a lot of things that kind of link together. There is an expectation that as a woman you should be married and have children. I find, like one of the panelists said, a lot of women in my organization will leave after marriage. They struggle to balance their work-life commitments. There's a lot of caring that falls on them as well. So it's very difficult for, I think for us as we sort of climb the ladder to fit what people think of is a leader, and for an organization like the British Council with its historic presence in South Asia in particular, it has been quite a challenge. And of course now I'm in Sri Lanka and I'm occupying this role as a country director, and I'm finding some similar challenges. I'm not sure if I actually answered your question or if I just went off on a huge tangent. But I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Amina, you're a mother of a very young daughter, a cute little daughter. So could you share some of your struggles, your daily struggles, because I'm sure a lot of people will relate to that and would like to learn on how you balance and manage both worlds.
I'm going to say this because my sister is on the call. Right now, my sister is here, so she is basically my daughter's other mother, and I therefore have no problem. Otherwise, she will kill me and I will no longer have any childcare. But it has been, I have to say this from the get-go, I am extremely lucky. I work for my family company, and I therefore, before I had my daughter, I was actually on bed rest for 4 or 5 months. So for me, it was been a struggle even before she was born, because I had to tackle working from home whilst protecting my child inside of me and not getting my stress levels up. So I was extremely lucky that I was able to go back to work, one. As Linda said, there's a lot of, oh, why are you going back to work? Why are you bothering having a child? And I have to say that my mom always instilled in us that we should be working, we should be financially independent, and we should show our daughters that that is important. So I got that from my mother, and she got that from her mother, who instilled that in her. So I was able to go back to work. I was lucky I was able to take my daughter to work with me till she was, I think, 1.5. So she knew everyone. She knew quality control. She knew the development department. She was pottering around inside the office complex. And I'm lucky that I live with my parents. So my mom was able to take on a lot of the caring factors, like picking her up from school, I drop her in the morning, my mom picks her up in the afternoon. But there are struggles. I try to do something with her every day, and it's exhausting. You're not a robot, you are a human. You have stressful days, you come home, drive them to tennis or basketball or whatever, and you have to not lose your cool there when they don't bother doing anything when you get there, right? And you've driven an hour to try and be involved. But it is hard. And a lot of women do leave their workforce when they have children. I mean, it's not when they're babies. Babies are relatively easy to look after because they don't, I mean, they just cry, they poop, you feed them, that's it. It's when they start running around that then grandparents find it hard to then look after. And in our workforce, we've come and said, our kids too, they're breaking everything, they're climbing, my parents can't look after them anymore. So therefore, that's when a lot of people leave. So I think you have to then realize that, as I said, you're human and there's only so much you can do. And there's only so many pieces of you that you can break yourself into to be there for your child. So there are a lot of activities that we try and do on the weekend so that I can take her and I can be involved. But there are things during the week that other members of my family do assist me with. And I do realize a lot of people don't have that luxury. And that's why I'm quite open that I have that luxury and I'm very, very lucky. But I think that whole, I do remember once I took her to a weekend class, like some key activity thing. And I got a lecture from some woman I didn't know. It was like, oh, you don't come on the weekdays. And I said, no, I'm working. I bring her on the weekend. I didn't know her, met her for the first time, got a half-an-hour lecture on why I should be there more for my child. And I said, I'm really sorry, but I don't know you. Like, I appreciate the advice, but you know, I think she's loved, may not be just by me, it's by her grandparents, her aunt, her cousin, but she's getting love and she's getting attention. So I don't see the problem. If she was alone in a room for 24 hours a day, I would think that is a problem. But I'm sorry, I may have rambled on a bit.
Thank you, Amina. Yeah, we are in a few minutes, we'll have a message from Her Excellency Sarah Halton. She couldn't be with us, so she sent us a recorded message. We'll play that in a few minutes. But before that, I'd like to engage maybe Haja on this. You know, we always talk about, especially when we speak publicly, we talk about our success stories. We expect that to be inspiring for the younger women. And like Tanya said, you know, we are here because of the women who walked before us and who paved the way for us. And we want to do that for the others, obviously, who are coming after us. But, you know, we shy away from talking about our mistakes, our failures. Nobody gets to any level without making a few mistakes along the way, experiencing a few failures. And Haja, being the chairperson of Unilever, you know, reaching this level in a multinational, coming to Sri Lanka, I think for the first time, right, Haja?
Yes.
Yes. So could you share some of your mistakes, lessons? How did you learn that? You know, we shouldn't lose the lesson in that, right? You know, I always say success can't be guaranteed, but failure can be guaranteed. And, you know, we must not lose the lesson. So I'd like to hear your views on, you know, any mistakes you like to share so that the others can take some lessons from that and not make them, right?
So Roshani, thank you. And I love the safety zone you have created today. I think I feel there is a psychological safety that has been created in this group, allowing us to really open up. Thank you for that. I think the first thing I will start with is to say that it's not easy. Yeah, so if anyone tells you that it's easy to grow up the ladder and continue be who you are and continue have your values and your ethics undamaged and sleep easy, it's not. So you need to have your plan, you need to work at it and never be the victim of your choices. You choose something, you be accountable and responsible for that choice. So now I'll come to my failures because some of them actually are in that you know, zone of what I have learned. For a very, very good portion of my life, unfortunately, I was defined by what society thought about me. I was seeking the acknowledgement of others, and I was seeking others to say, hey, well done. And only when someone says, well done, that I would think that I have done well. And you know, it took me 30 years to understand that what Linda said, what matters at the end is what you think about you and do not let society frame who you are. It took me 30 years. So whoever is below 30 and you think that others have the authority to decide on whether you're good or bad, please put that into one corner and forget it. I think my second failure is really in just embracing what life could offer me. So often I would go into like this zone of feeling insecure as to, am I really worthy of that position? So actually, even inside my company, I did have some positions where I was really young for the positions. And I think sometimes I failed in these positions, not because I was not able to do them, but because I didn't trust my capabilities. And I was not feeling that I was good enough. Again, this self-worth is a very, very important one. And now when I reflect back, I really do not want any of the women to feel any less good than any man. The third failure, I always never asked for a pay rise, for, by the way, we have not today discussed that sometimes, you know, we women may not be paid as much as men. Of course, in companies, we're doing a lot about this, and that could be a different topic. But women, we take lots of, how do you call it, introductions before we come to the point. Hello, I'd like a pay rise. Hello, I'm going on holidays, and I am. So I must admit, I was also part of that group of not even trying to ask. I may feel that I want it, but I'm not going to ask about it. And that's, I think, is a missed opportunity. Actually, it's a missed moment of leadership that I just take back as a person and say, you know, that was a moment of leadership that I could have played. So yeah, these are some of the failures. And hopefully, I think the one thing that I'd like to speak about is we all fail, men or women. The most important thing is how you stand up from that failure, and whether you recognize if it was really a failure, what have you learned from it? Honestly, I have learned and grown from my failures more than I have grown from my successes. The years where I've had the toughest challenges, where I was crying, are the years that turned out those that have made me, or made my shoulder, or made me a little bit taller than what I am. So I just to add that to the discussion.
Thank you, Haja, for being so open and sharing that with us. Thank you very much. Digayu, can we have the video on? And it's about a 4-minute video. And after that, let's take up the discussion on harassment, which is another point that we know happens, know is prevalent, but we try not to talk publicly. Some of our organizations are doing a lot of work on that. So let's talk about harassment immediately after the video. Digayu, all yours for the video.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Sarah Hulton, the British High Commissioner, and I'm delighted to be with you this evening. It's great to be part of the event in the company of the superwomen on this panel who've chosen to challenge themselves and broken down corporate and social barriers in their own right. Each year, on the 8th of March, the world comes together to celebrate International Women's Day. This year's theme calls on us to choose to challenge. It reminds us that through challenge, we can stir change. It's wonderful to celebrate this with the CBB and with Roshani, our first female president of the council, and the first that we have the 2 positions of vice president and treasurer held by women at the same time. Congratulations to this fantastic all-female leadership team. During my time in Sri Lanka, I've spoken with contacts across various spectrums and with business in particular to understand what they're doing to improve gender balance in the workplace. I'm really glad to see that the subject is being discussed in the Sri Lankan corporate sector, with some companies making great strides, but of course many recognising that there's more to be done. I've also heard from Sri Lankan women who have taken on the challenge of becoming entrepreneurs. Some are contributing in a modest way through livelihood projects, while others have built up successful corporate entities. But the example of a group of women I've met early on in my tenure has really stayed with me. They're part of Unilever's Saubhagya programme. The programmes provided livelihood for many of them who are breadwinners for their households. I was moved by the stories that they shared with me of resilience, perseverance, and courage demonstrated on a daily basis. The UK's supporting women entrepreneurs is something that the UK really takes pride in. We recognise that a diverse and inclusive business ecosystem is important for customers, entrepreneurs, businesses, investors, and for society as a whole. The UK's Investing in Women Code is a commitment to support the advancement of female entrepreneurship in the UK by improving female entrepreneurs' access to the tools, resources, and finance from the financial services sector needed for success. The Investing in Women Code also recognises that there's valuable work underway by individual organisations to help women who are seeking to start or scale up their own businesses. As all of you know, the UK believes that no country can truly flourish if half of its population is left behind. This is why we're committed to a foreign policy which consciously and consistently delivers for women and girls. Through our programme support, our policy advocacy, and our everyday actions, we continue to work across a wide range of gender issues. This includes tackling sexual and gender-based violence, increasing women's representation and empowerment in politics and public life, and promoting female participation in justice and transitional justice processes. I hope you're able to take a look at a special blog on our social media feed that gives more detail about how we at the British High Commission and the British Council are working on these important issues and trying to help across this broad section of activity. Whilst we're proud of the progress that's been made to improve the lives of women and girls, it's really clear that more needs to be done. For over a century, the world has celebrated International Women's Day. But as the World Economic Forum has noted, securing that gender parity is unlikely for almost another century on current trends. When women aren't valued as much as their male counterparts, when society doesn't think that a woman can become a politician or an engineer, when she can't access the skills, information or resources she needs to get or to do her job, or when she doesn't have full control over her own life and body, then her potential is going to be squandered. That's why the UK will continue to choose to challenge and to champion a fairer, more inclusive world at home and abroad. Thank you very much for inviting me today, and I wish you all the best for the panel. Thank you.
Okay, so as the High Commissioner, Sarah is the patron of CBB. Unfortunately, she couldn't join us in person online today, but we're very happy to have her recording. She's always been very supportive of our work. Thank you for that, Sarah. Yeah, so I said we'll talk about harassment. There is, it's been around. It's not been talked about for decades. But now, we've brought it to the surface. Lots of companies have processes around it. There is a lot of discussion on harassment and gender-based violence. Sarah talked about it too. I'd like to talk about that in a context where, there is so much talk about, even in Sri Lanka, even, if you take an example of tourists getting harassed on the road, to that level. So, if we can, I wouldn't want to call on anyone, but if you would like to say something on your experience on seeing this and how your companies are handling it and how we should handle it.
Could I just say, this is rather an abstract example, but we were I think we were overseas for in an exhibition, and I was behind the stall with 3 other colleagues. My colleague kept introducing me as a director. And I said, why do you keep introducing me? I don't want to be introduced to everybody as a director. It doesn't matter. He's like, no, so that they don't flirt with you. And I said, excuse me? And he said, yeah, so that they know their boundaries, because you're director of this company, they won't then harass you. And I said, do I have to be a director of a company not to be harassed? And then he just said, oh, well, you know, I was just he was protecting my interest, but that's the level of, you know, you have to have a certain boundary between you. Or, I mean, me in a headscarf, I would think that was enough to be like, don't talk to me, please. Like, you know, of a non-professional way, but evidently not. So that is everyday life. People are having this sort of unwanted male interaction.
Anyone else would like to weigh in on that, on what's happening?
I will speak as well.
Sure, please, Tanya, yes.
And this is in Europe, by the way. So I was in an interview, and my interviewer was a man. And in the middle of the interview, actually, my hair strands were in his hand, and he was checking the quality of my hair. And I was, okay, well, thank you so much. I think I'd like to leave that interview now. And I went to the HR team right after, and I reported the issue, and it was dealt with. Yeah, so I think the thing is, this is in Europe, well, some 10 years ago, but it did happen. I think it's very important that when there is a situation of harassment, there is a reporting of it, because the victims, sometimes they feel, or maybe I have done something that have triggered the harassment. So we start to become guilty of the situation ourselves. And the other thing is, let me not make a big deal about it. It was nothing. Then we start diminishing that this harassment was not big enough. Who are we to judge that? So I think it's a very, very important thing is to speak up. I think Arjuna said it. And at Unilever, actually, our program is called Speak Up, where we encourage women and men, because harassment can be, you know, I think also Linda has said it. Some women, when they get to the top, they become really needy, and a status of power suddenly creeps up. So that has to be quite open for male as well to say, I felt I was harassed or bullied or intimidated by certain comments.
So Roshani, my take is, if we create that platform for women to speak in the office environment, mental or physical abuse, right? We will also give them that strength. If they're being harassed at home, they will also take the same stand, that they'll speak out. A lot of the time you feel, because they're harassed at home and they feel they're responsible in some way, when they get bullied at work for some reason, or they get harassed, they have the same stand that they don't want to speak, because they feel, as Haja said, some way I have instigated it. So maybe I deserve it. Maybe I did something wrong. So I think it's important, not just for the work environment, for socially also, we create that. So we create that safe environment for them to speak out, even if they're getting harassed in their own home front.
Thank you, Tanya.
Roshan, if I may speak on this a bit.
Yes, please, Arjuna.
Yeah, so the harassment is a very, I would say, a taboo or a hidden topic still in Sri Lanka. We shouldn't forget that this goes beyond Colombo. And if you really look at a village life of a girl, it's quite a challenge for a girl to grow up in a village, or ensure that there is comfort and safety around. For example, you go to a country like Singapore, you don't need to worry about the hours that you work and go home. It's the infrastructure and the discipline in a country is there for somebody to feel safe. But here it's not the case. So I feel there are lots of challenges that we have on harassment. But if you really go into an office environment, I think there is harassment either as a light or a thick flavor when it comes to promotions, getting certain things done. Women face a lot of challenges around that. We shouldn't forget harassment in terms of online identities, where people are framed into certain situations and they're taken into some sort of ransom. So this is a topic by itself, but if you allow me to sort of shrink it into a common solution where we can get benefits as a solution, I think we need to create a lot of awareness where people, especially girls who are growing up, they know that, this is what harassment is. And this is how you can fight it. These are the options you have in life when you face such situations. Because I don't think a good part of harassment gets discussed and we actually take appropriate action for the wrongdoers. In interest of time, I'll pass it on to somebody else, but I thought of sharing that from my side.
Thank you, Arjuna.
If I may, just very quickly, just to add to that, I think the organization's culture is really important in creating an environment in which women feel safe to speak up. And I think that the little things, letting them go, will create a perfect environment in which the big things are then able to happen with the complicity of the organization. So I think one of the things that we were very conscious of at the British Council in my previous role was the micro aggressions that women face on a daily basis, and it made me think a lot about the culture of the space. So for example, if we're working in an office environment where a sexist joke is a challenge, or the way a man might behave just by the way he looks at you, or the way he addresses you, or his expectations that you're extremely nice to him in order to get something done. And so if we didn't challenge those micro instances, we were creating a breeding ground for bigger abuses. And so, these are things that are quite difficult for women to speak up about, because we tend to accept them to some extent as the price we pay for working in an office environment. Makes so many compromises, just another compromise. And one of the things that we did that I found was really interesting for us as an organization in my previous role, and something that we're doing in the region across British Council offices now, is holding safe space sessions where women can come together, and men actually, but separately, to talk about some of these things in a safe space, Chatham House rules, so we don't take names and we talk confidentially but openly about our experiences and air them and share them, and acknowledge that we're all experiencing some level of that. And then actually having a zero tolerance policy, having a tough conversation when a colleague has made an off-color joke that is a blatant violation of our values and how we expect people to get professionalism and so on. Those have been really useful, but I really think a lot as a leader about the micro things, because I think it's the small things that lead to the big things, and things like safe space sessions, which is sort of our way to get people to speak up safely, because I think women are extremely reluctant to do that for good reason. They'll often hesitate because they don't think that it'll compromise their future prospects in an organization. So yeah, it's something that's worked very well for us. It's been really interesting, and that discussion on the smaller scale has opened up really interesting conversations, and I think helped to create an environment where people feel safe speaking up.
Thank you, Maria. Anybody else like to contribute on that?
Roshani, yes, I'd like to just add a little bit. I think it's important that organizations continue to educate people on what they can and cannot say, because there's a lot of joke making, there's a lot of frivolousness in boardrooms or in senior forums or anywhere, at lunch table or whatever. That is actually very uncomfortable for many people in that environment. And that education needs to be created, just like the unconscious bias part of it. This is another area that needs constant reiteration, what's right, what's wrong in terms of behavior. And then a proper process of how you react when a complaint is brought, because it can't just be a witch hunt also, because then that leads to all kinds of other things that can potentially happen. But it has to be a proper process where both parties at initial stages are looked at objectively, and then action is taken. And that invariably requires outside intervention as well. And there are a lot of experts in the country right now that handle those things, and bringing them in really is helpful and has worked for us. But one of the things, sadly, that I find really prevalent in the organization is that the victim sometimes doesn't want to talk, want to get to a situation where it goes into investigation because it is your word against my word. And then, you know, there's always this trepidation and fear that the senior person in this relationship or in this interaction is going to be looked at as, oh, this other person is, you know, exaggerating or whatever, and then there could be persecution. So it's a very, very difficult area of a business, but an absolutely vital area that we need to have proper structure and proper process that in the way we react.
I agree. It is even the process is a very difficult process. Just to surface the issues is difficult, but once you at least get it onto the surface, you know, to investigate is even more difficult. I agree completely. Yeah.
But I think if people talk about it, it starts to become almost a preventive measure right there. As soon as the conversations start taking place, then they know this is an organization that takes it seriously, and then things.
That's right. So it's, you know, like many other issues, it's about awareness, education, and, you know, trying to get all of this into the surface and discussed about it. You know, a lot of us shun these topics because they're difficult conversations, but nevertheless, conversations we should have. So with that, I'd like to bring this to a close. We've had, I think, a very good discussion for the last 1.5 hours. Thank you very much to our panel members for giving us of their time. I hope we, you know, at the beginning of the program, we set out to do something different and handle conversations that are more personal, and hopefully through that, give the audience a message and some points to learn from and feel the difficulties or the challenges that our women on this panel have faced, and the men, the two men here have experienced, and, you know, the good that we've done in these companies, how they've facilitated. So I hope it was useful. Please do send us your comments, good or bad. We'd like to know that for the next time to learn from, obviously. Thank you very much once again to the panel and everyone else who helped, and thank you to the audience who registered and participated. Thank you once again.
Can I please ask everyone who is participating to please like us on Facebook and LinkedIn as well?
That's right. Please listen to Amina. She heads communication for us.
Thanks, guys. Thank you very much.
See you all.
Thank you
Take care.
very
Bye.
much. Thank you.